Hi, I'm Shanta Maharaj Singh, and as you know, I have a consultancy called Successful Mindset Strategies. During COVID-19, I took a decision to engage in communicating with people via YouTube. And I've got 3 sections going on, and this is section 3, where I am dealing with a chat with. And in this A Chat With series, I'm looking at different aspects during COVID-19. This morning, I've got Nervasen Naicker. Nervasen's a financial planner. And I have Omika Seeth. Omika is a wellness coach. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what has finance got to do with wellness? However, the two have a very, very strong link. And I'm going to ask Nervasen first to introduce himself and to talk about financial planning, specifically in relation to COVID-19. Yes, the disease is here. We're reaching peak stage. And my concern is we might be hallucinating and saying, oh, well, this is going to go by September. But I'm looking at it, it started in the Northern Hemisphere in their winter. They're now into their summer. It's hitting us with the winter. We're in the Southern Hemisphere. As soon as we ease out with winter and we go into spring and summer, which is obviously allergy, seasons and everything, and now they say it's airborne. We have the Northern Hemisphere going into winter again. Travel will open, and this is going to continue for a while. So we've got to live with this, and we've got to make mindset changes. Nervasen, thank you so much for agreeing to spend this time with me. Introduce yourself and tell us about financial planning. I'll give you a few minutes, and then I would get Omika to also introduce herself, and then the both of you can discuss what's necessary for people.
Thank you, Shanta. Thank you for having me on your show. I think I'm a financial advisor. Been in the industry for the last 10 years. I think COVID-19 taught the world, I'll say the world, that nothing is guaranteed. Do we have financial planning in place? Do we have our health in place? These are critical things which on a daily basis we encounter. And the last 3 months taught us our social behaviors has changed from wearing a mask, going out in public, doing things as normal where we take for granted. Is our financial behavior has changed as well? Do we need to relook at our finance? The last 3 months, from March to current, loss of jobs, retrenchment, reduction of salaries. How do we subsidize this income? Are we saving enough? Our families are financially secure in terms of security? No. I think the biggest stress in our daily lives is our finance. Are we looking at this in a very, I'll say, simple way? Do we save? The question, ask yourself, are we saving? If the answer is no, I think we need to relook at our finance. I think a simple tip we need to look at pre-COVID-19. Look at your December, January, February, and March bank statements. I think this will give you a clear indication of where our essential and non-essential expenditure. If we look at this, I think we'll be able to cut down a huge sum of our luxury spending, of going out, movies, things which we take for granted. I think during this lockdown, it told us that we can save. A lot of us are working from home, saving our fuel. We're not going out, we're not eating out. We can use this sort of income in terms of savings, in a savings plan. If you are a self-employed individual, who's funding your income end of the month? If the answer is no, you don't have any income coming through.
Yeah.
Retirement planning. How do you survive?
Nervasen, so you've done that. Now you've done income, retirement planning, etc. Omika, talk to us about wellness. And in your case
Okay.
specifically, I don't want to bring up your professional qualification, but I think you're very well equipped to talk about wellness from a money perspective, as well as from a health perspective. So I'm delighted to have you here to do that for me. So could you please address those issues?
Thank you so much, Shanta, for having me. Wonderful to be sharing the platform with Nervasen, and hello to all our viewers. I think, Nervasen's touched on very pertinent things. And prior to COVID-19, we probably never had the need to look at a budget. Neither did we have the need to look at our health as closely as we're looking at it now. I think now more than ever, we actually realize that our health is our greatest wealth. So often people perceive medical aid as being expensive or medical insurance as being expensive. And granted, it is expensive. But if I tie it back to what Nervasen was saying with regard to your budget, if you go back and look at your budget, you probably find that you have more than one cell phone account. You've probably got a few high-end retail store accounts, for example. You've probably got accounts with other service providers. Again, going back to eating out, how much do I spend on takeouts, on buying things that are luxuries? Medical aid is no longer a luxury. It's actually an essential item. Because if we look at the burden on our healthcare system in the public space, we realize that if we don't have private healthcare, we're in a little bit of a fix. So I think when people are looking at medical cover, budget is one thing. But the other thing that you need to take into account, or there are a few other things actually that you need to take into account, is what are your healthcare needs? Some people are very comfortable having just a hospital plan, which means that when you're admitted, you're covered for those high ticket items like a car accident, bypass surgery, strokes, etc. That will cover you from time of admission up until time of discharge. And many people might not know, but the Act actually makes provision for schemes that offer you hospital cover to cover chronic conditions as well. So that's the other thing that you need to consider. Your chronic conditions, your stage, what stage are you at in your lifestyle? The general trend is that as you get older, the need for healthcare is actually greater. So that, and then of course, your budget, and also look at your family history, because that's a good indicator of what you might be prone or what you might have a predisposition towards. So schemes offer various products. You have entry-level products, you have just hospital plans, and then you have the more comprehensive plan. So there is a mix out there. Obviously, plans are tailored, differently. So there's not going to be a package that looks exactly the same. You're going to have to look at your expenditure and what your need is. But I think it's mandatory that people start looking at that. They also just need to be mindful of the fact that if this is now a knee-jerk reaction, or I don't have medical aid and I need to get cover now, the Act actually makes provision for that kind of response, in that underwriting can be applied by scheme. So if you haven't had prior cover and you now want to join, the medical scheme may impose things like condition-specific waiting periods, exclusions, late joiner penalties if you're over than 35 and you are now joining. So people just need to be mindful of that, but rather start somewhere and rather start now.
Okay, so that's pretty interesting. You spoke about high ticket items, right? Nervasen, from the financial aspect, what's your comment about high ticket items? Would you say every saving is necessary, or one should actually now look at reviewing their savings and doing something that's relevant and affordable, something that they can maintain over a few years, instead of investing and then coming back after a short while, paying penalties and losing things? Some advice from you, please.
Yeah, Shanta, I think as each individual have to look at their circumstances, or by looking at the budgets. First of all, it starts with the budget, monthly budget. From that budget, it will give you a clear indication of your expenditures. And if you do have disposable income out of that, then you can look at what's your minimum premium you can consider saving. because we can save. It's a point where you're never too old to save or never too early to save.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And by looking at, I think during these circumstances, I think people need liquid cash, where the money is access to you anytime. I highly recommend a tax-free plan. It's a plan where the money is fully liquid to you, and as a beneficiary attached to that, in the event if something does happen to you, it will go to your beneficiaries.
Okay.
Try looking at flexible investments,
Mm-hmm.
where it's not committed over a long-term period. Because if you do go through a financial circumstance where you do need cash flow, you can dip into that portfolio of those investments. Because if you do over a long-term period, you will get penalty fees, admin fees, withdrawing those funds. It's always good to have those long-term goals, but I think you as each individual will have to look at the circumstances, what they're saving for. I think during this COVID-19, jobs were lost, lots of jobs were lost, retrenchments. And for example, if you contact COVID-19 and you're in hospital or you're unable to attend to work, you could be out for a month, 2 months. Your income is lost. What kind of savings do you have to subsidize your income loss?
Mm-hmm.
Your families are depending on you. The worst thing you can do at this point is to build up your debt, increasing your credit card, increasing your overdraft, taking long-term or short-term loans. That's the worst thing to do now, because you're incurring debt. Mm-hmm. If you're in a job with COVID-19, there's no guaranteed when this will end. If next year we have a lockdown and your job is on the line, how do you pay these debts off? Mm-hmm. It's always good to have a nest egg.
Sorry to just butt in. The one thing that concerns me a lot are these installment holidays, where, okay, you can pay in 3 months' time, or, for example, landlords reducing the rent payments now, but you've got to pay it up eventually. Can you very quickly explain what this actually means? It's not a help. Maybe if you've got a knife to your neck, it's a help. But if you can afford to make the full payments, go and do it. Please comment on that.
You're 100% correct, Shanta. The longer you delay in any debt, you incur in interest, and it builds up. You end up paying more what you actually owed from the start. Yeah. If you do have the means of funding that payment each month, stick to that payment. Because the longer you prolong this, the longer the term of your debt.
Absolutely. Omika, sorry, Nervasen, sorry, I just want to move quickly to Omika in between here. That's what you can do, in fact, not to fall prey to that, right? Omika, from the wellness point, how can one use their medical aid to their benefit? My concern is comorbidities.
Okay.
Very, very important.
I think hugely. I think oftentimes we purchase medical aid. It's a grudge purchase because it costs us a lot of money. And you find that you may go for years, for example, without incurring a hospital admission. So we don't actually look at the fine print, and we don't actually understand or unpack exactly what it is that our medical aid benefits offer us. So depending on the type of cover that you have, a lot of schemes are now focusing on preventative screening benefits. So it's the mindset that prevention is better than cure. And if they actually can pick up or identify a chronic condition, which you refer to as comorbidities here, things like diabetes, high blood pressure, asthma, for example, if they can manage that, they actually then manage the downstream costs. So if we look at, for example, an uncontrolled diabetic or an uncontrolled hypertensive, we know that those diseases have an impact on practically every organ in your body. So if you go back and if you look at what your schemes offer, go and look for those preventative screening tests. Things like where you're able to go to a clinic, like a Clicks or a Dischem, for example, and provided you pre-notify, you're able to do your baseline test, like a finger prick test for your cholesterol, your sugar, your BMI, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You probably find that a lot of your schemes have that. And once you pre-notify, it gets paid out of your hospital or your insured benefit and not from your savings. So you are not having to self-fund that. That's a very good indicator for your predisposition towards things that could become life-threatening potentially. We all know that with hypertension, for example, it's known as the silent killer because sometimes you're asymptomatic. And if we look at what we're seeing in the COVID space for now, if you've got hypertension, and if you have COVID, where you require hospitalization, the mortality rate is probably sitting at number 1 at the moment with that combination. But having said that, Shanta, I think people also need to make the shift in mindset. Often the perception is if I just pop a pill, it's going to take care of my chronic condition. And that is not the case. Popping the pill without making the necessary lifestyle changes amounts to zero. So again, within your medical scheme space, you will find that provided you meet certain clinical criteria, schemes offer disease management programs. And once you're identified as meeting the criteria, you then are managed by a wellness or lifestyle coach who essentially tries to manage your condition holistically so that they can actually contain the disease and they can then manage you outside of a hospital environment or contain the progression of the disease. So hugely important to go back right now and look at what it is that your scheme actually offers in terms of benefits. Because I think often we buy the product, but we actually don't understand the full extent of what we get cover for until there is a need to utilize the same.
Yeah. Now, I've got a question to the both of you. And this is a bit of a lighthearted question, lighthearted but serious in a way. So, Omika, you talk about wellness, right? And all of us know that when COVID started, we suddenly had lots of cooks and lots of chefs. And, I was wondering whether Jamie Oliver was going to go out of business or we were going to have Gordon Ramsays all around the world. And this cost money. And besides money, it wasn't good for the health. So that Nervasen, you from the money point, Omika from the health point. Damage is done. We have so many people who are going to need post-COVID counseling for this delusional that they had about, things they could do. But that was their way of coping, right? It's all a personal thing and everybody copes in their own way. Omika, food management. Nervasen,
okay.
What are you finding in your field with people buying their food on tick now, high-end groceries, and just losing the whole plot in this when they can't afford it? Omika, you go first.
That's a little bit of a double-edged sword. I think you've already touched on the comfort component, but I think again, if you look at affordability, so you probably find that dictates largely what you're going to buy. Having said that, I think you need to understand that if you're attempting to change your lifestyle in any way, it's moderation. Because the moment I think you have this big picture, like boom, there's going to be this magic wand that I'm going to wave over it and things are going to change. In my humble opinion, you've lost.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. So it's changes in moderation, but you also need to have the willpower and persistence to keep at it. So if, for example, you look at food, moderating what you eat, looking at, for example, what kind of food you're eating, how you're preparing the food, for example, is only one aspect. So what I ingest is one thing. But what am I storing here? What am I keeping in my headspace, for example? What am I doing to keep all the organs in my body functioning optimally? How much of water am I drinking? Or am I consuming all fizzy drinks and high sugar content stuff, for example? Am I exercising? So yes, food is a biggie because I'm putting it in. When it gets inside, that food is meant to be converted into energy so that my body starts functioning optimally. So for me, when I look at food management, it's a holistic approach. It's not just about what am I putting into my mouth. What am I thinking here when I'm preparing the food? Am I understanding that when I ingest this food, what am I doing? So I might be having the very oily food, very rich food, etc. but do I keep a picture in my mind of what it's doing to my arteries
The
as I ingest the
consequences.
food, for example, you know? So I think people just need to be mindful that, yes, we're in this situation, but whilst we're in this situation, it's a very good time for us to start making the changes. And I always look at wellness as more than just, what am I popping? What am I doing? For me, wellness is holistic. It's mind, body, spirit, soul. So food is food for maybe sustaining your body, but think about food in the bigger scheme of things. How am I feeding my mind? How am I feeding my body? What am I doing for me? And I think there's no better time than now, because we do have the luxury of time on our side, to actually start reevaluating where we're at. It's never too late to make changes. And
Omika?
it's never too late to see the changes, provided you're willing to run the course.
Absolutely. So you've agreed with what I also advocate, which is mindful eating. And I do that in one of my meditations as well on YouTube.
Absolutely.
Right? Nervasen, mindfulness with regard to buying groceries, the needs, the wants, and how best to use that money.
Yeah, I think when we go into a supermarket, I think the key thing is to have a shopping list. I think when we go into a supermarket,
True.
our emotions take over.
Yeah.
We buy unnecessary items which we don't need. For example, the luxury items will be your chocolates, your sweets, ice creams, which the most important item we went in the store for, but we end up don't buying that. We buying those luxury items. And if we do go in a shop, you're supposed to buy 5 items. I'm coming back with 15 items. And if you look at your shopping, your till slip, that's so you have a budget of 100 rand, but you're spending 300 rand. I think those are small key elements which we can save. I think doing bulk buying, which is a huge savings. Because if you go every time to the shop, it's costing you petrol on the shop and back. If you have a budget in place and say, well, I'm spending X amount on groceries, buying in bulk. Because every time you go in, run into the supermarket, it's costing you money. And during COVID-19, as I said, there were many chefs, cooks out there, professional. We all were professional chefs during this lockdown. And I think it also taught us that we can cook our own meals.
Yes.
Healthy meals as well, which Omika said is what healthy eating as well.
Absolutely.
Because if you go out to a restaurant, you're spending minimum of nothing less than 500 rand, depending if 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
If you can subsidize that amount of money into your monthly grocery, I think you will able to save. I always use the example.
Yeah.
If once a week you buy a takeout, it costs you 100 rand. In a month, it costs you 400 rand. If you substitute that twice a week, you're saving 200 rand, which you can substitute into a savings account, into a savings.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to hear from you. That's actually what I was heading towards. Mindful eating, in the sense that you convert that money that you would have otherwise spent on high calorie, low energy food, and save that money. And what does it turn out to? Nervasen, on average, $200 a month saved. What did you get at the end of the year, or an end of five-year period? Hypothetically,
I think it's the worst thing is to predict the future. I think the unknown with investments is.
But let's say hypothetically, if you took that and put it under the mattress, right? So that's 200 a month.
That's
and
200 to 12,000.
That's 2,400 a year, and you do it over 5 years.
12,000.
Exactly. So whether you put it under the mattress, whether you put it in the bank, whether you give it to a finance house, it's still money there that you've got in 5 years' time, and that buys you much more than the $200 a week at some red and yellow place. And talking about that, I must share this with you, because this is actually a proven fact that certain eateries, the takeouts, there are colors that stimulate your hunger. They are so attractive. And if you look at it, red and yellow, look at most of the I wouldn't say the restaurants, I'd say the fast foods. Look at what color is common through it. It definitely stimulates your desire to eat. So we can be mindful of these things, and share this knowledge. Not that we want everyone to be colorblind and walking around with dark glasses. It would look quite a strange world that way. But if people can just be mindful of these things and be more careful in how they manage, right? Parting shot. Omika, what would you say from a wellness perspective, from your professional perspective, both your professions? In fact, yeah, we will just touch both at the moment. What's your last message concerning wellness and managing your health and wellness?
I think it's strange, but often adversity is that knee-jerk reaction that we actually need to get us into motion. We often get caught up and sucked up in the routine, and we don't do things that we should be doing. So years may go by. You never sit with a financial advisor and reevaluate where you're at, for example. You don't actually go and do your tests, your baseline tests. So you have no idea whether you're sitting with an underlying or borderline chronic condition, for example. So I think now that we have the time, if we look at what's happening in the world, this arrived almost out of nowhere. And life offers us no guarantees. Now for me is the time where we go back and we reevaluate everything. We look at our health, we look at our wellness as in holistic wellness, mindfulness, etc. We know now more than ever, people are very predisposed to stress and stress-related conditions because of the current climate that we're in. So I think for me, this is a stop, it's a pause, and it's pressing that reset button in all areas of your life, because you actually do have the ability to press the reset button right now. And it doesn't mean that you go and move mountains. It's about making little changes. Nervasen rightfully pointed out that even if you cut down and if you save 200 or 100 Rand, it is something as opposed to nothing. So for me, I think my message is it's never too late to make changes. It's never too late to go back and read the fine print of your documents. It's never too late to pick up the phone and make that call and say, listen, I'm on medical aid. I've been on medical aid for however long, for example, and I'm now in a situation where I'm going to be losing my job. How can I retain this? I may not be able to afford what I was paying, but I really don't want to let go of this. So for me, it's about, like I said, pressing that reset button and asking for help. There's plenty of help out there in practically every aspect. And I think now more than ever, we're seeing that people are coming through and offering stuff for free, using social media, using technology as platforms to give people advice, etc. So don't sit there and wait for someone to come to you. Ultimately, it is up to you. And the power of choice in absolutely every area of your life resides with you. So it's not up to anybody else. It's up to you.
You would say be proactive and not reactive.
Absolutely, 100%.
Nervasen, parting shot from you?
Yes, Shanta, I think as Omika clearly stated, I think people had time to reflect during this lockdown period. What was your faults? Where were you falling short on? Where it was financial, your health? I think it also allowed you to think, change your mindset. Your mind needs to change. I think first of all, if you do have policies with any financial advisor, speak to your financial advisor, consult with them, get that advice, because no one has all the answers. Because you may assume you have the answers, but speak to someone else.
Someone professional.
Check your beneficiary. Yes, check your beneficiary statements as well, ensuring that the correct beneficiaries are correctly, if in the event of something happens to you, the beneficiary is correct, allocated to the correct people. The smaller details which we overlook. During this time, premiums, they may not want to pay the premiums or lapse the premium. Stick to your plan, stick to your goals, reduce the cover, reduce the premiums, but stick to your plans. Because you need to save, you need to have security for your family.
And I think, Nervasen, now as well, wills, for example, are huge because we're looking at the mortality rate and what's happening. So maybe now is also a good time to actually look at that.
Yes, 100%. That's my next point. Wills are so key in any financial plan, or anyone for that matter, needs to have a will in place. Because in the event if something does happen to an individual, what happens to your estate? You need to have security.
Talking about that, strange enough, that was one of the first questions that my financial broker asked me. You know, it wasn't about anything else, but it was, Shanta, you've had tragedy a few years ago. You know, is your will up to date? And I said to him, well, yes, I have. He said, when last have you looked at it? And I told him 6 years ago. And he said, you know, tomorrow could be 6 years too late.
Yes.
Do you want to die being a selfish person and letting your, you know, your family, or in my case, my son, having to look through things? Or have you updated it as your situation has changed? So these are things that people don't seem to realize. Well, they also do very simple wills. Yes, a will is a will, and sometimes you don't want to get too complicated. But as your life gets complicated, you also need to change things. Am I making sense there, Nervasen?
Yes, 100%. You need to really look at your will at least once a year. If there's any huge changes in your life, birth of a child, marriage, buying a new asset, property, if you're acquiring anything in terms of your financial wealth or changes, your will needs to be updated. Because in the event if something happens to an individual, what happens to that if there's no clear indications where your assets are going to? And who funds that your estate? Do you have funds available? Those hard work what you built up for years in terms of your property, your cars, do you need to sell those assets to fund your estates?
And estates are not cheap, eh?
Yes.
Funding estates are not cheap. They're really not cheap. Especially, you know, if you want it done honestly. I mean, these things cost a lot of money. So I'm just so delighted I had the both of you. I feel you've shared so much, and you've done it in such a way that I wish I could go on much longer. Unfortunately, we can't. And if anyone needs to contact you, you're on social media, or they could actually do it via my social media page. That's no big deal. And if they have their, you know, their financial planners and their wellness planners, they need to go and see them. I am not saying that you've got to see a specific person, but go and see somebody you're comfortable with, because these are personal things. And when you're discussing money, is one of the most personal things. Sometimes I think money is more personal than your shower door. You know, it's such a delicate issue that it really can be more personal than your shower door. So have a look at these things, review your lives. And Nervasen and Omika, thank you so much. And for all that you've, you know, shared, and you've shared it so selflessly and so willingly. I wish you well. I wish you safety, good health. And I hope that more people are going to have some form of a mindset change after watching this video. Much love, be safe, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Shanta, for the opportunity.
Absolute pleasure.